You wanted to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflex here, back with another Eternal Return video. For today's video, we're going to be going over a few team fights that I had during my last Twitch stream and explain my thought processes behind them. I would have loved to do this through the replay system, but unfortunately it's totally broken, and so this is kind of the best in-between I could find for replaying, reviewing the fights rather, and explaining my thoughts through them. So hopefully this will be educational. I'll be choosing some random fights from different types of characters and trying to explain why I fought the way I did. And it won't be like the best quality guide just because team fights in this game can be very one-sided, but I've tried to take fights that I actually had to make decisions in instead of fights that were just very like low brain power and very stompy. Go ahead and begin with this one. So obviously right from the start you can tell that we're contesting Meteor. We know there's two teams because of the console that was taken a bit ago, and we're chasing this team now. So the reason why I don't want to fully commit is because I know Dayrider's turning, and since Dayrider's turning, that will confirm the presence of a third party. So we do see a team behind us, and our Zahir is chasing pretty far, but he'll turn around the moment that we turn around, which is very respectful of our Zahir player. And we're going to walk up and basically start towing the line with this Lunox. So right at the very beginning, if you know how Lunox works, you know that she has a drag on her E and then a whip skill on her W. So what a lot of Lunoxes will do is that they'll try and hit you with that drag ability first so that it's easier to hit her whip skill or just do damage to you. So with that in mind, my movement in the very beginning part of this fight is to try and juke out one of those two abilities so that I can play more freely and use my abilities without being scared of being attacked. So that's why I click up and down here. You can see I go down to try and predict the drag, which she uses. And then something very interesting happens where the Selene, without full HP, decides to stick to the Meteor, which is a very bad decision. So this is kind of going not what I was assigned to do, but what the Selene was trying to do. You never want to ego a Meteorite when you can see two very long-range mages are on the other side. So Ava obviously can hit you from a screen away. Theodore can do the exact same thing. They don't know that there's a Zahir, but already with those two mages alone, you really aren't allowed to stick this Meteor. And you just saw your tank use an important ability, so you're very vulnerable. And we both see that this Selene just stand there, so we just decide to end her instantly. So you'll notice that this Abigail actually did something pretty smart. She flanked from below us, which means that since me and the Ava were kind of distracted by hitting the Selene, she actually got a really good flank on our Ava player, so our Ava is already very low. So I have a decision to make here, and that's whether I want to go into melee to help my Ava player out and then be the person to get hit by the Abigail player, or I can group up with my Zahir player, who's a lot safer and obviously very high HP, and kind of stick to him instead of going into this weird scenario where I'm just going to be meleeing an axe user. So I do decide to go down with the Zahir just because it seems safer. And in the end, the fight kind of just breaks up and we end up cleaning up because obviously the 3v2. So, very brief overview of my initial thoughts. When you're playing such a high burst character, not such a high range character, a lot of the fights can be determined within the first few seconds, and that's kind of what I want to showcase with this clip. So this next clip is going to be a game of me on Shokai. Shokai is typically played as a tanky bruiser, but I've been playing him more of an amp assassin, so this will kind of hold true for a few amp assassin playstyles, but it is a bit different just because Shokai has an ability that can be overridden by totem, if that makes sense. You'll see what I mean in a second. But basically, Shokai is a bit unique in the way that if you know that you have an ability that lets you be invincible, i.e. totem, you can kind of play differently and incorporate that into your playstyle as you play this game. So as you can tell, there's already 5 teams left. We have 1 kill and I'm dead 1 time, so we are very clearly like decently far behind. So this game and this fight isn't necessarily favored for us, and we do get jumped in the very beginning. So we don't really have good vision. We didn't see any pings. We don't really know what we're walking through. And you can see that our W Marlene is pretty behind. And then at some point when I check this car, we get jumped. So right now, my immediate thought is to run back to my team and make sure that they're aware that I'm being attacked, just because again, we are very far behind, and I don't want to immediately mash my abilities and go in, even though I have my totem, which is essentially an invulnerability button. So I'm going to walk back and wait to get more information, and then the information comes where their entire team flies out. So you can tell that this team has a few kills under their belt, so their mastery is probably higher than ours. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a pretty tough fight just because they're ahead of us and they have 3 melees that will do a lot of damage. Thankfully, Debbie and Marlene is decent against melees. We have a Lennox that's very good against melees, and we have myself, who is going to use Totem to prevent the melees from bursting me. So I'm going to be using this to my advantage. Right now, they're all grouped up, and since they're all grouped up, my immediate thought as Shokai is to press ultimate, because if they jump on me, then that's good, because that means my W Marlene and my Lennox, who are still full HP, can deal stuff. And if the Dylan decides to jump me and use her ultimate to suppress me, that means that she's going to be directly in the way of my ultimate, which means that as she's hitting me, she'll be getting damaged by me. And if the rest of her teammates decide to jump in, obviously Shoichi can just W behind me, so he won't be affected, but the Aiden will take a few wave ticks as I'm getting suppressed by Dylan, and the moment that suppression ends, I can just totem. So that's the reason why I immediately turn around and just hit R. And you can see that the Aiden did what I said he would do. He just E'd right through me, but since the Shoichi and the Dylan are still ahead of me, that's still 2 targets I can damage with the ultimate, and it's very, very optimal because I'm still very high HP, and once I hit totem, they can't hurt me. So this angle could be better, but honestly, like, I'm pointing it towards my teammates, and it's 3 melees, so I'll get very good coverage even if I can't move. So that's what I decided to do, and that's the reason why the fight ends up doing very well, because you can see that Meowthin understood the assignment and E'd to the enemy melees towards my ultimate, which damaged him a lot. And then the Debbie Marlene's obviously trying to stay with us and fight with us, which is why she ults into me. Even though she misses, I don't think she drags anyone here. She still, you know, is with me, which is really important because we're fighting melees and I provide a lot of crowd control as well. So she jumps into me, and then I'm able to peel for her with my E. Obviously, she's still getting hit, and I think this Dylan nunchuck skill is really good and stuns us both, which ends up taking her down. But the fact of the matter is that we ended up killing one of their melee assassins pretty easily, because he not only took a lot of damage from my ultimate, he also got hit by my E, which also does a ton of damage, and my spear skill. So right now it's a 2v3. Obviously it's going to be shortened down to a 2v2 very quickly because the Debbie Marlene ran out of mobility, and the Dylan understands that and is going to go and finish her off. And you can see that I have no cooldowns, so I'm just going to exit and let my Lennox do her thing. I haven't seen the Dylan use her ultimate yet, so I'll be keeping that in mind as I move here. And then you can also tell that the Aiden still has 2 ranged auto attack charges, which he'll prefer to use on me or the Dylan. So I'm just gonna walk straight away if I can. That movement was just to me. That movement was more me trying to juke because I was aware that she might have been using it. But once she uses it, I'm just walking away. But I was thinking that, and then I saw the Aiden kind of walk over here for some reason, and my E came back up. So I was like, okay, if Aiden's walking away and my Lennox is right next to me, why wouldn't we jump this Dylan right now? So because the Aiden walked away and didn't really, you know, group with his team and stay grouped, we just get to jump to Dylan, and she takes a ton of damage, and she has to run away. And then Aiden comes in for, you know, the subsequent 1v2, which is very bad. So I think we end up taking Aiden out, and the Dylan gets away because she's Dylan. So this clip kind of goes on for longer because then there's a third-party situation that pops up, which is another thing that I want. This is the reason why I want to include this entire clip, is because this also adds to the decision-making I have for this next part. We get a Mithril, which is very nice, and then suddenly I think a Jackie pops up. So this is a very fed team. You can see the red glow above their name, so they're very, very far ahead, which I'll use to my advantage because I know how very ahead players want to play. Not to like generalize, but Jackies will generally play very all in. So the fact that I see her running at me immediately, I think she killed me earlier this game. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this Jackie killed me earlier. She's definitely willing to kill me again. She just saw me use an ability, so I had to back up and run. So again, Lennox is gonna try her best to peel for us, but she can't really stop this Jackie from running at me because she has leap and everything. Does get pretty good slow, but Jackie does join in, and then the W Marlene ends up being hit. So the reason why I choose the W Marlene is because Shokai's W provides not only a heal, but defense up. So if the Jackie continues to decide to hit the W Marlene, then that's actually good for both of us because she's tankier for the next 3 seconds. And I'm still waiting for all my cooldowns to come back up. So Spear Skill, E, and Q are basically all I need to kill this Jackie. You can tell that she's very, very squishy. Not only because her HP bar is very like wide, which means she has less HP, but also because she does so much damage. Nimble Nuna has done a pretty good job of not allowing characters that do a ton of damage to also be super tanky, with certain exceptions, but those exceptions are pretty few and far between, and you'll probably know them very quickly. So since I know that Jackie is a character that can only deal damage if she's squishy, I know that this is a pretty free E to hit because I just saw her jump into us. So Debbie Marlene is going to also understand that she has to get out, so she hits the E button. And then it gives me time to look at my E and then use it into her. It also helps that the Jackie decides to blink, which is very aggressive of her. I don't know like what this build is, and I don't know if she just knows more about her build than I do, but this just seems to be a really bad decision. I haven't used any abilities since my W and my initial E that she saw me use. So in her head, she should be aware that I can use my knockup ability, which will still do a ton of damage. And the W Marlene could have her ult for all she knows, which she'll need the blink for as well. So her blinking immediately is very greedy because she assumes that she'll just one-shot us, which she does do a lot of damage. Her Q is up. I think she uses like right here, but by the time she lands, she's dead. So very aggressive. Again, obviously very far ahead. You can see the names glowing, so she's just very egotistical in that engage, but that's something to keep in mind. Even if you are very far ahead, you can't go in if you're not also tanky. You have to understand your limits, or else you're just going to throw away a game like she just did, and then because of that, the rest of her team ends up popping up. Dylan, I saw her use a bunch of Qs, so I know that she doesn't have the best burst, but I should still be a bit aware that she can hurt me. I also see that Lennox is pretty low, so I know for a fact they've used at least a few cooldowns, but I still want to back up because I don't want to take, free auto attack damage. So I end up walking away. My E is almost back up, and my ult's almost back up, so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is a good time to go back in. And then for some reason, this is kind of like an extension of the last video, where you really should not be greeting certain things when you don't know the status of everyone's resources and cooldowns, and they can see you do it. So Dylan obviously goes in, whacking me, but I'm not really that concerned. I just CC'd her, and I know Lennox is coming. And Debbie Marlene's a little bit below me, so I have support up to my other teammates very soon. And I'm pretty tanky, even though I'm full amp, so I'm not too worried, because also you can see her items aren't super upgraded. So I end up smacking around, and I decide to ult, because if the Dylan kept fighting me, obviously I kill her through ult. And then again, for some reason the Aya decides right now is a good time to res, which means that the Aya is gonna probably go down. So she has ult up obviously, so she gets feared, but my Lennox is just gonna run her. We're two very tanky characters running at a pretty squishy character without any cooldowns, so she will end up going down, and the Dylan will eventually get away, but this is a really messy fight from the two people we played against. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand that there are certain fights you can take even if you are behind, if you understand how your character works and you have your teammates and the other team gets overzealous. Obviously, if the other team played a bit more cleanly, this probably wouldn't have been possible, but this is just more of capitalizing on enemy mistakes, because those will exist a lot more than you might think they do. So this next one's going to be me playing Abigail, which is a character I don't play very often, but she is more of a true melee assassin than Shokai is, because you lack crowd control, which means that the angle of how you approach fights is going to be a lot more important. So the beginning of this fight is kind of a misstep from me and my teammates because we're not watching our map. We decide to start the mutant bears when there's a team coming down right there, which we really should have noticed, but we didn't. So they end up surprising us. Obviously, we're having a bit of fun, and I am watching my teammate get kind of destroyed by the bears. So it's just funny giggles because we're all friends in this pre-made. But at some point, the other team shows up, and that's when I realized that I might have messed up. So right here, you can see I'm looking down at where my Ava is. Ava is a very long-range character, so she should have a bit more freedom when she chooses to engage or how she engages, especially since we have a Marcus right here. So I know for a fact that they have two other people over here, and I'm not really sure who those characters are, but I know for a fact that one of their main engagers is right next to me. So I'm actually thinking about running through him, because I'm thinking like, okay, his teammates are probably behind him, and if he's here, I can just run right through and flank the other two that are kind of getting pinched by the Ava on the other side. It also helps that my Estelle, even though she's very low from the mutant bears, does have her ultimate, which is a gigantic shield, so I have some safety in that regard as well. So you can see here, the Marcus chooses to ult me, which is kind of ambitious because I have an instant blink, which I will end up using and dashing through. So that's the reason why he doesn't flip me. You can see the W indicator right here missing. He does end up hitting, I think he does actually end up, yeah, I think it tags me, which is why I'm stunned, but I'm still getting the distance I want. So right here, I look down, and I'm like, oh, like I see Meowthin was fighting a Luke and a Rio. So I'm thinking, okay, I can probably just run through this Marcus because he just used everything, and now Jory or Estelle is here to lock down the Marcus. So I'm actually going to run past and try and see if I can get these actual characters that I can kill. So I kind of misjudged where they are because I thought they're going to be down here. But the Rio is very close. Like, she is really close because she probably didn't expect me to run directly at them, which is very ambitious again of me. But this is kind of like the style of play that I think is really valuable because people won't expect you from out of vision, especially if they're being distracted by somebody else on the other side. So this actually gives me a very good engage because I managed to tag them both with my E or my W, which gives me 2 teleport marks, which is really important because this gives me a lot of freedom to choose how I want to take this fight. So again, I have my Estelle here to help me peel with her ultimate. My Ava is about to come up and help me. So I'm very confident that if I take this fight, as long as I press my ultimate to kind of delay the inevitable collapse on me, they can help me out in time before I end up dying. And again, since Estelle has her shield ultimate, I'm very safe in that regard. So I decided to blink onto Rio and immediately ult, just because in my head I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm a Rio player and I see that the Abigail is right next to me, the odds that I take 2 blinks is pretty high. So I'm just like assuming and predicting that the Rio won't react in time or walk correctly to avoid my ultimate. So that's why I jam my ult. She does greed the auto attack for some reason. I don't think she would have gotten out, which is why she went for it. And this in turn gives me 3 more ult stacks. And you can see my Estelle is already giving me this shield, which is what I was talking about. So I actually do get focused, but since the shield's on top of me, I save like 400 HP, and then the Estelle pops up and we finish that fight. So obviously we had a really good flank, and you won't necessarily always get that flank, but this is kind of just the importance again of being very aware of where the enemy team and where the carries are in relation to you, especially when you're playing like a hypermobile assassin that has a stall option with a tank that can also give you very good stall to follow up with you. So this next clip is going to be a continuation of the Abigail game you just saw. Basically, this will be a more honest quote-unquote fight that we had later on. Instead of flanking this time, I actually just had a straight up fight with them, but also this will show the importance of having good vision and making decisions off of that vision. So hopefully it's going to be helpful in that regard. So from the very start, our Ava is the one that face checks the enemy team, which is fine, obviously. The main thing is that we're going to know where they are and they won't know what they're up against, which we'll use to our advantage. So I'm going to go ahead and loot the box just because, again, they can't see me, and the Ava is keeping very good tabs with cameras and also her abilities. And because of that, we'll do some pretty good poke, and that'll really set us up for the fight up ahead. So right here, obviously I can see that there's a Jenny who's going to be my main target as an assassin, but I can also tell that the W Marlene is getting hit, and the Abigail is also pretty squishy, so I do have a few options here to work through. So right here, I do see the Abigail and Jenny kind of grouping together, so I'm going to go for a W on top of both of them, but I only end up hitting the Abigail. So you can see that I'm mashing my E to jump to the Abigail because I know for a fact that if I jump to her, there's going to be a very good setup for myself where I can hit the Jenny very easily with that. Unfortunately, the game's really buggy. You can see me mashing and I even stopped moving. But for some reason, I think there's a bug where since I'm hovering over the Jenny, the game is like, oh, you can't cast there. So instead of letting me cast, it just bugs me out and makes me stop moving when I'm trying to go to the other Abigail, but obviously it doesn't work. The other Abigail even gets to hit her W and E on my Estelle, and then I missed the opportunity. So I have to kind of rethink my game plan here. So obviously I know that they're kind of split. We have a pincer on this Abigail, and these two are very close to me, and I'm the very scary assassin that is probably stronger than they are. So there's a few options I have here. I can either raw E on top of them and ult, which is probably not a bad idea, or I can just walk straight at them and kind of greed the ultimate. So since I see that there's like very little space for them to move, Abigail's a pretty mobile character, even just by walking, and you can tell that there's really not much space. Like, they're either running into my Estelle, which is a bad decision, or they're running straight down, which I can cut them off through, and that ends up being their decision. And because of that, I do end up hitting my Q, which gives me a lot of movement speed, so I get really close to the Jenny. I do miss my tactical skill, which is kind of unfortunate, because I would have liked that movement speed, but I can also notice that the Jenny is auto-attacking me instead of immediately running away, which I will keep in mind because that kind of decides why I play the way I do in the next 2 seconds. So the reason why that's important is because since I know that she's willing to auto-attack me in melee, that means that if I use a very short-range skill, the odds that she just lets me use it and the odds of me hitting it are a lot higher than if she had just walked away immediately. So that ends up being really relevant here because I see the W Merlin walk up. I don't really know the range of Abigail ultimate, but I've seen it a few times, so I'm like, okay, this should be close enough to where if they greet another auto attack, I can hit them. So you can see that's what happens. She goes for an auto, right when I press R. That's kind of the timing and prediction I'm going with. And the W Marlene, I saw her walk up already, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hit this no matter what on at least one person. So I can like blink at the very bare minimum. So we hit that. Jenny, instead of walking all the way out, she's gonna hit her ultimate, which is a lesson of if you're trying to get away from something, you should probably clear the animation before you overlap yourself with a buffer of your own. So she ends up getting hit, which is really bad, and obviously I do a bunch of damage, and then we finish the fight out. But so this is kind of a lesson on how you can use other enemies as a point of like chasing down the priority targets, but also just understanding when you can just simply walk up to them and beat on them if you see how they play. A lot of people will play the exact same way when they do in neutral as they will in fights. So if you see them like doing like very aggressive actions, the odds that they continue those aggressive actions are very high unless they're very self-aware of what they're doing, which is a pretty high level skill, which I think a lot of people in Return Return haven't developed and probably won't for a very long time. So this final replay that I'm going to go through for this video is going to be me on Haze, which is kind of a repeat of the Theodore one, but since Haze has better overall DPS and a bit more mobility in her kit, I decided it was a little different enough to justify putting here. So this is the final fight. Obviously we have Wick, but the other team is very fed, so we're still going to be a little bit careful when approaching. And since I'm Haze, I understand that I have a lot of range, and since we're running Haze Ava, we basically just saw this team run into the chapel, which is why we're approaching them like this. So I'm going to try to use my poke the best I can to start the fight from a very good range. So that's my ult here. You can tell that the other team is very melee comparison, so their goal is going to be to run at us as fast as possible and stop us from poking them for free. And our job is to like keep them away and try and get as much free damage as possible before they actually engage on us, which ends up going very awry. You can see my first rocket went nowhere, and we're going to end up being fought really easily. We do drop the Zahir really low, which is why my Lena is like, okay, it's time to go in. But once again, kind of like a lesson from the last video, you can tell that the other Dylan sees that opportunity to go in because we're distracted by trying to finish off these Zahir. So Dylan's just like, all right, this is my time. I'm gonna go in right now. And in one Q, she gets very close to me and the Ava, which is, once again, it's very easy to approach on people when you know they're distracted by something. So don't be afraid to just work on that instinct and go in when you think there's an opportunity. So because of that, the Dylan ends up going up on the Ava. So we've already taken down the Zahir for the most part, but he will get his ultimate off. Actually, I think, yeah. He gets his ultimate off, which is really important because that means that's most of his damage. And with that alone, that gives the Rozzy enough time to probably take down my tank. So knowing this is already very sketchy, especially since I missed my Q because the Dylan juked it. So my Ava is out of R juice, and she's also very close to a character that can one-shot her very easily. So my main goal here is to kite for this Ava as much as possible and try and body block this Dylan as much as possible, which is why I'm playing like this. So we do end up getting this Dylan pretty low, but she ults and takes my Ava down. But you can tell that once again I missed my EQ. I do hit on the Rozzy, which is really important, but this Dylan is kind of far away, and because of that, I'm trying to flash on top of her just because like there's no point in letting her go away. Because if I let her live, then that's a potential 2v1 where she runs and rests and I have to deal with the Rozzy. So this 1v1 is very sketchy because Rozzy thrives in the 1v1 situation, and she is mobile enough to get on top of me, especially since she just saw me use my blink and a few of my other abilities. So my goal is to walk away as long as possible and just try and greed as much time as I can. But since I can use my R for free and I have Scotty, I'm going to go ahead and use it just to make sure that I have some damage coming in as she is forced to approach me. Because keep in mind that I'm the artillery mage. I can kill her teammates very easily, but she can't really stop me from doing that unless she wants to face tank me. So I'll be using this to my advantage as the Rozzy walks in. You're never obligated to use every single press of a, I guess, like limited resource like Haze ult if you don't have to. And I think a lot of people assume you have to get full value in order to win a fight, but really you just have to do enough to win the fight, if that makes sense. So obviously I missed this first missile, which is pretty bad. And I end up queuing, which is this a Q? I think it might be an auto. But nonetheless, I end up going for one more hit because my abilities aren't quite up. And I immediately mash W because I see it coming up. So the reason why I mash W instantly is because I don't want to accidentally whiff it with Rozzy pressing E. I think if the Rozzy was a more confident player, she would have pressed E immediately, which would have really screwed me up because that means I wouldn't have been able to dash away and I would have been like kind of disoriented for a moment. I end up using my W really early because my E isn't up still, so that means that my W EQ combo isn't quite ready. But even though that's a thing, I can just mash Q instead, so I can get some value off of that time. I do end up misplacing my Q because I'm not a very mechanical player. I think if I hit my Q center, it might have killed her. But I understand that Rosie in this situation is very favored because she has so many tools for mobility and also just like an invulnerability on her E. So because of that, I kind of had a decision to make. I'm like, I either kite or I just force it. The odds of me winning if I kite are very low because she still has Q to tag me and she still has E to dodge my abilities. So I just end up going for the EQ immediately instead of waiting for the auto attack because in my head, I'm thinking she's waiting for my auto attack to go through before she does anything. So if I kind of cut that animation short, she might not expect it and I might do just enough to take her down, which ends up happening. So a bit of a tight 1v1. If the Rosie pressed E earlier, it could have gone her way, but fortunately for me, I just kind of played around that expectation that she would wait for my cooldowns to hit my cooldowns, if that makes sense. So yeah, that'll be the video. Hopefully it was helpful. I know that it wasn't the greatest of a tutorial, and I know I rambled a bit to explain everything, but I'll be trying to make a more in-depth video. If I'm being honest, it's really hard to get quality fights for explanations like these, just because fights can be so volatile with like how they're set up, and how they play out, and how fed the other team is or your team is. But hopefully this is a bare minimum of explaining how you can approach fights in the future and how you can play them to the best of your ability. So with all that said, I hope you guys have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.